Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. There's now 43 participants in this event, so I think we'll get started. We only have an hour. And today, this is the 9th of the NEXUS Gains talks. And today we're going to be talking about the future of water research with Dr. Mark Smith, who's the Director General of the International Water Management Institute. So next week in something like more than 6,000 people will probably go to New York for the first UN water conference in nearly 50 years. And this is clearly a very big event, which is important to highlight the scale of the current water crisis and to obviously build momentum for urgent action on water and on freshwater ecosystems. It's also a very big event for the CG, for the International Water Management Institute, and for the NEXUS Gains initiative. And we're going to be playing a key role at the conference, including the culmination of, or not the end, but the culmination of the first phase of the Transformative Futures for Water Security process, which has been ongoing for the past 6 months, with a specific aim of developing future research priorities, which can make research more impactful in the future and address some of the global water challenges that we face today. And so it's my great honor to be able to introduce Dr. Mark Smith, who has been leading this process for the past at least 6 months, probably a year actually, that when he first conceptualized it. Mark Smith is, as I said, is the Director General of the International Water Management Institute. He was formerly IMI's Deputy Director General for Research for Development. And he brings more than 25 years of research and program management experience in water resources, agriculture, climate and sustainability. Prior to joining IMI, he was the director of the Global Water Programme at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, from 2008 to 2018. So he's got a lot of experience of multi-regional programs in Asia, Africa and Latin America, addressing issues like river basin management, transboundary cooperation, water governance, climate change adaptation, and nature-based solutions. So he has a broad experience encompassing many of the issues that are important today. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Mark Smith, and he will go through and give a presentation on the TFWS process. And after that, we'll have a short panel. Well, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And we can see whether there's time for questions. And then after that, we'll have a quick panel discussion. But over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Matthew. And hello, everyone. As a start, I'm going to try and share my screen, which I was finding very difficult earlier on. So hopefully it'll work. Yeah,
we can see it.
You see my slides?
We can see your slides, but it's not in presentation mode. We can see the whole of your screen, including the whole of the desktop screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we see the notes page.
Okay.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. So thank you, Matthew, and thank you for the opportunity to share what we've been doing in the Transformative Futures for Water Security initiative with this community around the NEXUS Gains initiative. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what it is that we set out to do and why. As you mentioned, the outputs from the process are framed around future priorities for water research and innovation, or missions, and I'll come to explain that, the implications of this mission-driven approach for research and innovation. A little bit on this is perhaps something we can pick up also in the discussion, where Nexus research aligns to all of this, and then the messages that we're going to take into the UN 2023 Water Conference. I do want to start, though, by thanking the CGIAR NEXUS Gains initiative, which has been one of the financial supporters of this process and of the dialogue and the conference process. So I thank you all. I thank you very much for that. Contributing alongside a few other contributors, including the CGIAR Ukama Ustawi Initiative, the Water Research Commission of South Africa, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and also IMI and a couple others as well. Okay. So where I want to start is with You'll see a few quotes on the screen, and these are to convey that really over the last several years, there have been some really critical questions raised about the direction of water science, and whether water science is truly delivering against the needs that stakeholders, that our communities and our world have from water systems research. Those needs, of course, are tremendous. I'll touch upon those in just a moment. But there is a gap between needs and delivery. And I point you especially towards the quote at the top of the screen, which came from an editorial in Nature Sustainability from a couple of years ago, which is worth reading. So in a world suffering, as we speak, from increasing threats of both too much water and not enough at the same time, water studies need to confront the reality that it may be pursuing too many publications and not enough ideas, and that this is an untenable model for the field and a potential danger to society, which is pretty strong words about about our profession, or those of us working in water research, our profession. That's a big challenge to us. And of course, there is a really serious problem, and that problem is growing because water security is under huge pressure because of rising water demand, rising competition for water, worsening pollution. We all know the story. And for example, the recent SDG report from, I think, also 2021 said that, as an example, achieving universal access for safely managed drinking water by 2030 requires a quadrupling of the rate of progress. So we're seriously falling short. As an indicator of that, we're seriously falling short. And of course, all of this is being exacerbated, because of climate change. Water risks and extremes are intensifying as climate change, terminology we came up with in the last few weeks. Climate change is supercharging the water cycle and creating all sorts of droughts and floods that are featuring across news media over the last several years. And one of the things I like to bear in mind when we think about that is what we're seeing now. And this was a comment made by David Gray. People may be familiar with David Gray, formerly of the World Bank, formerly of the IMI Board of Governors. He made the comment that what we're experiencing, what we're witnessing today and over these last years is just a warning of what's to come because of climate change. And indeed, the IPCC the water chapter in the IPCC report from 2021 said that water-related risks are projected to increase with every increment of warning. So we have to ask the question then, as it's stated at the bottom of the screen there, will water security be out of reach without bold and urgent transformation of water systems? If water security now and in the future is going to demand transformation of water systems, as indeed our One CGIAR mission says is the case, alongside water systems alongside food and land systems, then water research and innovation should be focused on systems approaches and to help us understand systems, but also how we use research and innovation as part of that process of catalyzing and delivering systems change, for which the Water Energy Food Nexus, Water Energy Food and Ecosystems Nexus is a prime example of those types of systems approaches. And the NEXUS Gains example, NEXUS Gains is a prime example of the kind of program that we need to drive forward systems change and systems approaches. But if that the charge laid by that Nature Sustainability article, if we're to take that seriously, that water science is not delivering what's needed, then what is it that we should do? What should be the priorities? How can we reorient research and innovation for water systems more broadly to help drive forward those needed systems transformations? And the demands for doing so are growing. That was clear to me last year in a few events. The first was at COP27, where I attended a high-level roundtable on water security, convened by the Egyptian government with a whole set of prime ministers and presidents. And it was really impressive how clear those world leaders were in the comments they made in that roundtable about the importance of water security, the fact that water security is at stake for billions of people, that it needs increased global cooperation to tackle it, it needs increased investment, it needs a higher political priority for water. And also at COP27, of course, governments agreed for the first time, we all celebrated this in the water community, agreed for the first time that water adaptation of water systems needs to be a key part of climate action. So this brings us then, as Matthew mentioned, the upcoming UN 2023 Water Conference in New York, now taking place next week. And that has been spurred in part by the recognition that there is a political moment for water, and that's because the demands are increasing. There's increasing recognition at political level that concerted focus on water is needed, and current approaches, current platforms globally are really lacking that. So it's a key ambition to raise ambition for water security, and also to catalyze, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, to catalyze a focus on water research and innovation, both in those kinds of policy domains, but also more broadly. So with that backdrop, that sort of sets the scene for why it was that we were contemplating this Transformative Futures for Water Security initiative. And as we went into that, we started to ask, on the back of that context, we started to ask these three questions that you see on the screen. So is water research and innovation focused on the right things to support future water security? What are the users of knowledge, research, and innovation? What are their major needs for the future as it's going to exist, that future for which we in David Gray's words, are seeing warnings of now? And how do we use the UN 2023 Water Conference to catalyze that high ambition? And the next set of questions that we asked ourselves was, well, who is going to deliver those future changes? Who is going to deliver that future transformation? It's going to be it's going to be drawn from that list of groups that you see on the screen, starting with youth. We're talking about the future leadership of the kind of transformation for water security that we need is going to be led by youth. But it's also government, policymakers, business, communities, farmers, conservation, etc. The key point here is that delivering this future transformation, it will not be us, it will not be scientists and engineers who deliver that future change. We will support and enable and create knowledge and deliver data and evidence and deliver the innovation to help with that transformation. But it is those types of stakeholders who will actually deliver the kind of change that is needed. So this led us to that background, led us to this Transformative Futures for Water Security initiative. And in that, it was designed as a dialogue process. I'll go through the steps in just a moment, but it was designed as a dialogue process, very much having in mind a bottom-up process so that we could bring together just those kinds of stakeholders that you saw on the previous screen, but also rooted in a South-South dialogue, reflecting where IMI works, reflecting where the CGIAR works, reflecting where these needs are most acute. We also had this idea of youth co-guardianship for this dialogue process, meaning that as we all along, we wanted to have a co-ownership and a co-leadership of the process with youth and with youth networks. We wanted to bring together diverse stakeholders, so the policy, business, development, and science communities working with youth co-guardianship. And then the dialogue series itself was designed first as a set of online regional dialogues to bring together those stakeholders and to use a facilitated process of exploring the future and the future of water security to culminate in a final conference in South Africa. And I'll show you more about all of this, to culminate in a final conference in South Africa with the purpose then of defining 5 or 6, it ended up being 8, as you'll see, 5 or 6 high ambition missions for science-based action on water security, and to bring together around those missions groups of stakeholders, coalitions, alliances to catalyze and move forward those missions. So we ran, the process was designed, as I said, using a methodology that was built around the idea of future search. So based on those participants coming together and envisioning a scenario for change to bring about future water security, given the complexities that we face in the future. So the process was structured around this central question that you see on the screen. So what are high ambition collective actions that will create strong alignment of knowledge and research, policy, business, and on-the-ground implementation to deliver future water security? So this is the process that we followed. Yeah, in fact, Matthew, we got started about a year ago. We had a first discussion panel event about all of this at the 9th World Water Forum in Dakar, which was last March, last World Water Day, so a year ago. And we then worked through September, October, a co-design process with a set of stakeholders, particularly a set of those youth co-guardians. We had a set of feeder events in various places in the Middle East, in Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Nepal, then feeding through into these 8 online regional dialogues that I mentioned. These online regional dialogues, they took place in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, Central Asia, moving across into the Middle East and North Africa, then Western Central Africa, Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, and then across into Latin America. Then the next step in the process was the final conference, which took place in Cape Town over the course of 3 days in February, about a month ago. And altogether across the whole process, we've had more than 1,000 participants and more than 400 organizations taking part and contributing to this to the results that I'm going to present to you in just a moment. In terms of the regional dialogues, of course, a great diversity across those 8 regions, a great diversity of things were said, a great diversity of themes were surfaced, and you get a sense of some of those from these word clouds that you see on the screen. And so just a sampling of that, I'll come to those themes more in just a moment. But from that set of regional dialogues, we synthesized what stakeholders view as the key ingredients for how you bring about systems change. So as I said, it was based on this idea of future search. So, how do we get from the problems that we have today into a water secure future? And so distilling out of that, we have this set of, as you see on the screen, this set of transformative strategies that are meant to work together to mobilize and manage change in water systems. Familiar things here: water governance, multi-level water governance, multi-stakeholder dialogues, research partnerships that cut across policy and action, local and indigenous knowledge, integrated technical services, youth and women's gender equality, private sector engagement, financing, etc. So those elements that need to come together to help us move forward on systems transformation. These were distilled out of those regional dialogues. So moving then into the final conference, as I say, this took place about a month ago. We had the 8 stakeholder groups, which I just failed to mention to you. So our 8 stakeholder groups were youth, national level policymakers, local government and water utilities, private sector, funders and investors, water users from across sectors, agriculture, energy, and so on, conservation, NGOs and civil society, knowledge generators, and I may be forgetting one, but that's the breadth of the stakeholders that we were very deliberately targeting in this process, and we had them all represented in the final conference, including representatives from all of those regional dialogues, as well as a few additional global players coming into the final conference. Again, working with youth co-guardianship, we had 185 participants from 144 organizations and 55 countries with us in South Africa. We did also have a parallel event in Vientiane in Laos with the Southeast Asian stakeholders because of some visa hiccups. But altogether, we had a really broad participation in that final conference. So we used the final conference over those 3 days. We used the inputs from the regional dialogues, and the focus was on a process of working through, a very interactive process of working through the elaboration of these missions. So just to clarify then what we mean by missions. So the intent here, and it's based on particularly on work that, if people are familiar with this idea, it's based particularly on work by Mariana Mazzucato on mission-driven research, which you can read more about. So the missions are big, difficult goals for transforming water security that will create impacts at scale by combining applied research, policy change, private sector action, and investment, and doing so with inclusive development that is based on equality and equality between women and men and between generations. So they're really, the missions are intended to be, if you like, moonshots for water security, or mini moonshots for water security. So big, difficult goals. So at the end of the 3 days, we had set out 7 missions. And those who are in the audience here will recognize some of the words in these missions. We then subsequently worked on putting them into a standard formulation, but I'm pretty confident we kept to the intent of the missions that the stakeholders had laid out. We also added an 8th mission, which I'll come to. So I'll just briefly run through these 8 missions, these 8 big goals for transforming water security. The first is building farmers' resilience to climate change and water risks. Embedded in there is water productivity, climate smart agriculture, and so on. The second is delivering sustainable stakeholder-driven WASH. Embedded in there is accountability, information, policies, universal access, and how we bring that about. Third goal is increase freshwater availability. Embedded here is circular management of wastewater, reducing water pollution, technologies to enhance non-conventional water, technologies to cut non-revenue water losses, so making more freshwater available. The fourth mission was around make water infrastructure future ready. This combined the idea of ecological and built infrastructure, but ensuring that it's oriented to the needs for that more uncertain and that future that has more risks and extremes as we look forward. Moving to the left-hand side of the diagram, right-hand side, sorry. The fifth one is about data and information. So this is working with digital solutions and operationalizing those and really making use of those in solving water security problems. The sixth is we termed make water decisions fit for the future. This was about integrating the full range of values of water alongside the multiple objectives of different sectors, alongside the multiple objectives of different stakeholders and their trade-offs. The seventh was around water governance and the importance of that for enabling all of this and transboundary cooperation. And the eighth, and this is the one we added subsequent to the conference, is adapt to future water regimes and risks. So here's climate information, preparedness, management, innovation, and capacity development in relation to water risks and extremes. And the reason we added that, because there was a logical gap, we realized, without that. Now, in the work of the participants in the conference, that was present, but we had gone through an exercise in the conference of ranking the different ideas for missions, and that one had fallen out. So we just pulled it back in as we finalized. So those are the 8 missions. And this diagram you see on the screen is it's a work in progress. We're working with a graphic designer to try and capture this all a little better. But there's a couple of points here to make, just that these missions, they come together. So we have in green what we term a set of subsector missions. So the agriculture one, the WASH, freshwater availability, infrastructure, and then a set of missions colored in blue, which we call the enabling missions. So that's the data, the governance, the trade-offs in decision making, the adaptation to future risks, etc. So you've got we've got a growing recognition that these missions, they work together, and alongside them, you see we need to be looking at how do we apply these transformative strategies to mobilize and manage the systems change processes that go with them. So that's the big picture of the missions and what came out of our process. So how do we use them, of course, is the next question. And the key here is this idea of aligning research, using the missions to align research and partnerships. And there's some big areas of activity that we need to be looking towards how we align those. And as you see along the bottom there, in the blue blobs. So how do we align applied research programs alongside inclusive development, alongside private sector actions, alongside investments, bring those to bear in combination with these transformative strategies to deliver those missions. Within that, of course, as research and innovation communities, we will need to be looking at, okay, what are the specific priorities that logically and strategically we need to be building into those applied research programs. So just the last couple of slides then. So what are the implications then of this Transformative Futures for Water Security initiative and the missions that have come out of it for water research and innovation? The first thing is to note is that we've just published this week a comment in the journal Nature Water, which reflects all of the work that we did in the Transformative Futures initiative and presents those missions. And you can see in the green box a quote that I pulled out of that paper, which I'll just read the first sentence of it. Water research and innovation should not focus on just technology and data developments, but elevate innovation in how to transform water systems, and then some elements of how you bring that about. And to put that in contrast to that statement, which is in blue at the bottom of the screen, that statement from that Nature Sustainability editorial from 2021. So we're really trying to use this process as a bottom-up process to build that different track to help us be more effective with our research and innovation relative to these tremendous, as the word I used before, these tremendous future needs, future demand on what it is that we do. So in terms of how we do that, the first thing to note is this isn't about starting from scratch, right? I talk about aligning various activities against these big goals, the missions. Well, we start with what we're already doing, which is lots. So we leverage and align those existing investments and actions across all sorts of different stakeholders and all sorts of different activities, assess what's missing, and then work with partnerships to bring together those elements of mission-driven research to align, as I outlined before, the applied research, inclusive development, etc. And we want to therefore make sure that we're integrating our research and innovation into broader transformative strategies. And then the final point at the bottom of the screen there is really looking forward to the UN conference. My own assessment is that far too often at these kinds of international conferences around water, which is water is a complex topic. It's a complex resource to manage. It's got political elements. It's got health and climate change and all these different sectors, all of these different things going on. So in these big global conversations that happen, in my experience, science is often left out. And let me explain that in just a moment. It's left out not because it's not valued. It is valued, but there tends to be 2 lines or 2 or 3 lines in the communiques from those kinds of meetings that say water science is important, we value it, and then essentially the implication is go away and do it. And we need to change that. We need to make sure that water research and innovation is a mainstreamed part of the agenda for water and water security going forward. And so that means making sure that we are relating what we're doing and talking about to policy that we're doing, we're able to do that in political forums by showing that our research and innovation is aligned to those big goals that are needed to really solve problems as we go forwards. So I think this is the second last slide. So how does this, for this community around the NEXUS Gains initiative, where is the nexus in the missions? The nexus is not, it didn't emerge as one of the missions. And to me, that reflects that the goal isn't nexus, the goal is a set of outcomes. But what I did earlier on was I aligned the goal statements that you have in the NEXUS Gains initiative with the mission, which I've copied into the left-hand side of the slide, with the missions and the relevant missions and transformative strategies as I assess them. So NEXUS Gains is focused on water productivity. It's focused on energizing water and food systems, trade-off analyses, strengthening governance, developing capacity for women leaders, and those goals feed, and working with, therefore, with NEXUS and the system approaches around NEXUS, they feed into delivering the missions for building farmers' resilience, for future water infrastructure, for decision making that's fit for the future, for good water governance, for the adapting to future water regimes and risks. The research that you're doing, it supports and feeds into some of those key transformative strategies, the research partnerships piece, the integrated technical services piece, gender equality, etc. So I think it's fair to say that for the NEXUS Gains community, what I'd laid out in the previous slide, that statement, that holds the statement in the green box, that holds no fears for the NEXUS Gains community, or indeed for CGIAR. That's the kind of work that we should be doing and that we do bring to the table. I'll just wrap up. Last slide, Matthew. So what are we therefore taking to New York? Well, actually, first, the conclusion for CGIAR. So we have, out of this process, some invaluable set of inputs, stakeholder-led inputs for strategy setting processes in CGIAR and IMI. We have a model for stakeholder and partner engagement, which the wider community of stakeholders around CGIAR is clamoring for, and we've shown one way of doing it, at least. And then, in terms of what we take into the UN conference next week, I said here, business as usual won't address business as usual for research and innovation, and won't address the intensifying water insecurity issue. We need high ambition, and the Transformative Futures missions can be a high ambition roadmap to help implement the water action agenda, which is one of the key outputs expected from the conference next week. So let's put mission-driven research and innovation at the center of the global dialogue, not sidelined, as I touched on a moment ago. And let's use these missions and recognize the value of having them as stakeholder-led and global South-led missions for transformation. Build coalitions around them, and recognize too that for in-house for IMI and CGIAR, we bring critical capacities for delivering this kind of mission-driven approach, and that applies to water systems, but it applies also to the broader CG systems mission of food, land, and water systems transformation. Matthew.
Great, thank you very much, Mark. I'll let you overrun a little bit there because I think that's very important. Yeah, no, it's fine, because it's very important and very interesting to learn about that process. And I think what you've demonstrated actually is, that NEXUS Gains is applicable across all of the missions. And actually, we're doing the sort of research that needs to be done for in the future to have real impact and to bring about real change and real transformation. So thank you very much for that, Mark. I'm afraid, we have overrun a bit, so I'm not going to have questions at the moment. If there's time right at the end, I'll go back to the questions. I know there's a couple in the Q&A, but for the moment, I'd just like to move on to the panel. As Mark said, this process had a lot of stakeholder involvement. And as he's also said, we've learned a lot about how to bring stakeholders different stakeholders into this sort of process. And so for our panel, we have we're very grateful for some of the people who were actually present throughout the process and who were in Cape Town. We've asked them to come on and just give a few minutes of their perceptions of why this process was important and what it means for their sector, if you like. And so the first person I'd like to ask to just give a brief statement is Runak Shrethra. He's GWP South Asia, based currently in Nepal, and he was a youth guardian. As Mark said, the youth is very important, and he was part of the youth guardianship that was involved in this process. So Runak, over to you. Thank you.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. And it was great hearing this presentation and being part of this entire process. So more generally, the process itself was very participatory, and there was a strong participation from different stakeholders, as you'll see today as well. And something that's important in this situation is to create a safe space for each stakeholder to share their perspective and have the discourse that we had to come up with these missions and the mission alliances down the road. So I think that was something that I appreciated a lot as youth joining into this conversation. In terms of involvement of youth, we were very much participated from the very co-design process of these workshops. So it was very demand driven in terms of what youth wanted their role to be in contributing to this process, which was very much appreciated by all the youth co-hosts that had participated throughout this process, as well as all the other youth stakeholders that were included in national, regional, and the global conference and dialogues. Often youth are usually siloed into a different table or a space. However, here the youth role was very cross-sectoral. Carolina, who's from the Youth World Parliament of Water, mentioned in one of the opening panels for the global conference that youth normally wear two hats. One is of being a youth and one is of being a young water professional, either a researcher, for myself, a program officer. We do have these different roles and function in this intersection between these two roles. So it was really good to see how both of these roles were balanced in this conference and this process, because it was much more active rather than passive. We were designated as co-hosts and not just being there to take notes or doing things normally youth are assigned to do. So a very active role to participate and contribute to the dialogues themselves, but also help in managing and organizing the event during the days. And as Mark also mentioned, it's at the core of this program, and it makes sense because these are missions for the future, and youth are going to be the future leaders at some point to take these on. So having that guardianship to own these missions as something that was jointly produced and collaboratively produced will have a positive and longer lasting impact in taking the missions beyond the normal timelines, for example. So it was a very non-conventional approach of youth inclusion as co-hosts, which was very much appreciated. And I do believe that these mission-driven alliances will bring about that change and help achieve these missions with the momentum that's being gained with the conference, which is now followed by the UN Water Conference. So a lot more to be done and the starting points for more action. And it's also important in the context of NEXUS Gains. It's really important to bring youth into these new spaces of integrated, innovative, systemic processes to involve them so that they can contribute, understand, as well as take them forward and champion them throughout the coming time. So I think that is also something that would be very much appreciated by the youth. So that's my perspective as a youth co-host and participating throughout this process in this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Runak. Very good to hear the youth voice and how it was really central to this whole process, and a good example of perhaps how it needs to be incorporated in the future, and good that you pointed out that within NEXUS Gains is something that we need to think about. So thank you very much. Next, I'm going to hand over to Hasula Wickramasinghe. She's at the Climate Change Secretariat of the Ministry of Environment, Sri Lanka, and she is representing policymakers. So over to you, Hasula.
Thank you, Matthew. And Ayubowan from Sri Lanka. Greetings, which says, may you live longer. I apologize for the video not being on, But I must say that I must also thank Dr. Mark Smith for inviting Sri Lanka to participate in the TFWS workshop. And also it's something that we had never experienced before, because as the prior speaker said, it was extremely informal and we were set about in groups and no laptops to be seen. So it was quite a different perspective. And also what I realized is like it had huge countries and small island nations and islands like us. So it was quite a big interactive sessions and with so many different stakeholders. And we were able to casually talk with everybody very informally. And also the fact that a country like Sri Lanka, which is an extremely small island nation, was able to relate with all the big countries as well. And then the funny part was that most of the issues that we realized, like which we thought were only mainly for us, we realized that most of the countries face the same issues. And also they also face the same type of way of addressing solutions. And from the policy perspective, like for instance, Sri Lanka, we have a lot of water in a sense that we have so many cascade systems, but and with 103 rivers, but of course, 70% of water goes to the sea. So as Mark quoted before, we have too much water and not enough at the same time. So all those things we were able to address and have a look at it. And also the fact that our economies are driven by water. And with agriculture, textiles, and tourism, and we actually, it's mainly water driven. And in spite of all that, we also have food security and energy, because we have nearly 70%, we depend nearly 70% on hydro energy, and we have a rich biodiversity, but even all that is affected by water scarcity. So as policymakers, we understand that our policies are inadequate to efficiently manage water, and we do not have an effective regulatory framework, and we require financial sustainability. So all these aspects were discussed in group discussions, and we were able to support the missions, and all those missions, they relate to us. But for our country, the missions that will be prioritized is to increase freshwater availability and make water infrastructure future ready, and also to make water decisions fit for the future. Another thing we understood is we have our usual, we prepare our NDCs, we prepare the implementation plans, and we also prepare our national adaptation plans, and we have a lot of plans. But we also have policies in place, but then you do wonder, why do they not work sometimes? That is sometimes, it's simply because we need, what we have identified is the gap of data, of research-driven data, and also science-based information, which we lack. So those are things that are extremely important as policymakers for us to go on to our policies to make the transformative future for water, which is required by our countries. We really do need that science-based approach. And also, we also depend so much more, maybe so much on governments taking decisions, and we don't think about the stakeholders. From this particular workshop, we understood that youth should be, their voices should be heard, and even the NGOs, the private sectors, they all should come together if we are going to formulate a policy, or if we are taking a decision which the country should go forward with. All stakeholders should be there and their voices should be heard. So these are the lessons that we learned from here. And also, I hope the UN Water Conference will take the voices of the island nations, will consider them, and also give us the science, the technology to suit our needs, and the research we require to have food, energy, and ecosystem, as well as water secure future for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ursula. That's very interesting to hear the perspective from a government there, and the importance of this process for at least one government. So thanks very much. That's really interesting. And I'm now going to hand over to Marcela de Souza, who's from the Watershed Organization Trust in India. and representing the NGO sector. Over to you, Marcella. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share from the experience of civil society. And the civil society I represent comes in both from a practitioner perspective as well as from the lead from applied research. This experience for me was a very enriching experience. You know, it was lively, it was refreshing, it was very thought-provoking, and having the different stakeholder groups from across the globe working, discussing, you know, struggling together to come to to address the issues, to find out solutions, was really energizing. So that meaningful mix of the different stakeholders made us also realize that when we come out with perspectives that we need to address, between us, I learned that a lot of negotiations had to take place in choice of words, in choice of, in the listening to one another, not just pushing an agenda, but listening, finding out what's most suitable. So that's something that is so crucial that we as NGOs need to also adopt, as well as participate in, and, you know, even put forward the agenda, because NGOs come in from a perspective of the bottom up. We have the eyes of the ground. We have, from the eyes of the ground, it's very integrated. There's no, we cannot segregate water sector or land or livelihoods or food or health. It cannot be, because that's the way the people, the communities and villages see it. So the NGOs bring forward the perspective of a very integrated approach. And I think this is what I also began to realize and was happy to hear, the need for a systemic approach, an integrated systemic approach, so that we reduce the mistakes at the onset, because we understand the backward and forward linkages. There is no time to waste. The climate change is upon us. It's experienced tremendously. And today in India, at this time, we are experiencing the temperature rise, and it's being, the forecast by IMD says that the temperature is going to be much higher than what it was before. What is the impact of this temperature on the water resources, on the food resources? That's the whole chain. And that's where we begin to realize the need for an integrated research that is required. So I was quite happy to hear, as Mark shared, about the research perspective. I also participated in the research group during the session, because that I come from an applied research NGO perspective, because we look to see what happens on the ground. What I began to realize is, you know, that a lot of the research sometimes is so sectoral. Even NGOs do not sufficiently use the research. So here is a request to the research that comes out from this group. How do we make the research information or knowledge? How do we disseminate it to practitioners on the ground who can use it where they are? Another aspect of research which we in my organization are looking at also, and which I think is important, is the behavioral aspect. Finally, whatever happens with nature, it's triggered because we humans are either exploiting it or, you know, amassing whatever it is. So we have to trigger that. We have to understand better the behavioral aspect, and then find out what in the behavior of people can be triggered for improved management of our resources. I have to also share here that we speak about taking research to policy. That's the most common outreach of research. Here we look at research into use for practice, but I would also go a step forward and say we need to look at research findings and convert it into a language that even communities understand. And in my experience, we have found when we take the findings and convert it into a language, that means the way community would understand, put it in that aspect. The people respond, they take decisions, and that is where decisions have to be taken. And this is what I would like to, I gather from what the discussions are, from what I learned during the session. And I think I was very enriched, to see how we can shorten the time by using the different tools already existing by the different partners so that we can take it forward. We have no time to waste. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was really great, and I think you were addressing some of the comments which are in the Q&A about how you reach communities with research, how you look at societal behavioural change as well. So questions, these are difficult things to be done, and I think you've at least addressed some of those questions. So thank you very much for that. It's really great. With that, I'd like to hand over to Mohammed Nasir Jamal. He's the Rabail Technologies in Pakistan and is representing the private sector. Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. I'm Engineer Mohammed Nasir Jamal, and I'm representing Rabail Technology from private sector. Thanks to Mark and his team for inviting to this talk. And I was taken on board in the regional dialogue in Pakistan, and since then I'm part of all this process. As far as Cape Town is concerned, it was totally different from routine conference. They said it's a working conference. Yes, I emphasize it was a great and working conference. We work together and we get our missions done without any boring lectures, I'm sorry to say, or any speeches which don't have any conclusions. But the Cape Town conference was entirely different. We work together, we have fun, we have working atmosphere, and ultimately we come up with the 8 missions. Rather, that was 7. Later on, it was being added another one. As Hasula said, all 8 missions are equally valuable, but every country may have some priorities. So if I'm talking about from the Pakistan point of view, I must say that I'm in love with the mission number 1 and number 7, because being an entrepreneur, I knew that we have to focus on the region where there is a huge potential. So as far as farmers communities are concerned, they are utilizing around 90% of the fresh water for agriculture production. And by the way, in Pakistan, it's not 90, it's around 96 to 97%. So that's why coming to the business, I've decided this field because it's a huge potential for the business as well. We have to take care of that 97% of the water. So that was in Cape Town. We have talked about this issue, that 90 or 97% of water share, and we learned a lot. We have a versatile, broad spectrum. There was professionals from every field. We worked together, and we learned that almost every country had the same problems. So we talked to each other. We talked to the Jordan community. We talked to Indian community. Sri Lankans were there, and Egyptians were there. Africans were there, and especially from the Cape Town scenario, that day 0, that was a great motivation for us. It has sensitized us that we have to focus on our community, which is utilizing 97% of the water. So what I've mentioned out there and again here, that we need to work on technology transfer, especially to the underdeveloped countries. Like in Pakistan, I'm working in sprinkler and drip irrigation business, but it's very costly, no doubt. As far as today's research and today's science is concerned, the most effective way of irrigation is sprinkler or drip irrigation, but it's very costly and here in Pakistan. So it's almost near to impossible for our farmers to adopt. That's why governments are giving subsidies and like that. So we need, and the main reason for being so costly is that almost everything is imported. We need to import it from Turkey, from Spain, from America, from European countries. So if there is something which can be worked on, like a technology transfer to the underdeveloped countries, it will I suppose it will minimize, not only minimize or lower the initial cost, but it will also increase the employment. And obviously, in return, it will help the underdeveloped countries, and in turn, it will help in establishing the peace. If we are living in peace, every underdeveloped and developed countries have peace, then only we can talk about the water. But if there is no peace, unfortunately, then somehow everyone will looking for his own interest. Nobody will look for the international interest or for the water or something else. So we need to transfer the technologies, and I suppose that it must be mentioned at the UN conference that technology transfer, and number one, number two, financial institutions to support these farmers of the underdeveloped countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. That's really interesting and a good perspective from the private sector and an entrepreneur. So thank you very much for that. And then finally, I'd like to, but not least, but over to Sita Arial, who's from the Federation of Community Forestry Users in Nepal. Sita, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. And first of all, I'm very grateful with the host organizations for giving me this opportunity. Although I'm not the participant of Cape Town conference, but I was participated in national level dialogues, workshops, which was related to the transformative future water security, and also NEXUS Gains. And also I was a participant of a regional online virtual meeting. So based on that programs, what I learned, actually I came from the Federation of Community Forest Users Nepal. It is a strong civil society organization having more than 22,000 community forests, and which is influence about 14 million population in this process. And the community forest user group are also supporting for the conservation of water resources, and also supporting for the water security processes. That's why I'm also representing the civil society organization from Nepal. Actually, yes, from these 2-3 dialogue process and workshop, what I learned that the transformative future for water security programs is very multi-stakeholder driven programs, and there is engagement of different sectors like government sector, civil society organization, private sector, academician, experts. All the sectors are equally engaged. They are equally involved, and there is a discussion, very participatory discussion. All are equally share their experience, learnings, and what about the challenges for water security in future, and what will be the main things we need to focus for the sustainability to secure the water security process. That's why I learned this process is very participatory, very multi-stakeholder processes. And actually, the Nepal is a climate vulnerable country. That's because of different things, like, for example, climate change issues, infrastructure development, urbanization, rural road construction in unmanaged way. It has created many problems for water security, water resources, that is impacted for the water scarcity and also drying of the water resources. And finally, this cases is impacted to the women and youth of the Nepalese. That's why the civil society organization of Nepal, they are supporting for the water conservation and water water resource protection, and actually community forest user groups, they are also protecting the forest area, which is also in an integrated management manner. That's why it is also supporting the water security processes. And in coming days, why I want to focus for securing the water is also lots of women and youth are engaging in the water source protection in Nepal through community forestry process. That's why what I want to say that in coming days, the recognition of the voice of women and youth and marginalized community who are actually victim from the water resources, their voice should be recognized. And their actual issues and challenges should be addressed during the water security planning processes. And there is also integrated water security management plan is needed in Nepal, because we have lots of discussion dialogues from government sector, private sector, civil society organization many times, and all are realizing that yes, there is needed the integrated policy, but we don't have, because we are working silo sectoral basis approach. This is most important in the context of Nepal, and in community forest user group is a huge potential to work on it to secure the water security in future. I just want to share this information now. If any questions, I will address on it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sita. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all the panel members. I'm afraid we've actually run out of time. I apologize if we haven't been able to get to the Q&A. There's actually some really excellent questions around how you transfer research to communities, how you bring in behavioral change, how to incorporate indigenous and traditional knowledge. And so I know that all of these things were thought about during the process. We'll come back to you. We'll try and answer those questions by email. But thank you very much for that. But I'm afraid we've now run out of time. So I'd just like to thank very much to Mark Smith, and all the panel members. It's been a very enlightening session. Really interesting to hear about the TFWS process and what it's done, and hopefully what it's going to do in the future. We wish you, Mark, a lot of luck in New York and getting these messages into that process. And then beyond, I know that beyond that, there should be a process of driving these missions forward and developing research around them. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Ed Cramp and the Scriptoria team for the technical support behind the scenes here. And just to say that our next NEXUS Gains talk will be in about a month's time. We'll send out the topic and the dates. We're still trying to decide on the topic, but we'll have a topic in the near future, and then we'll invite you to that as well. So with that, thank you very much to everybody, and good evening. Thank you.